Next, Hazur, we are very fortunate to have a very celebrated personality with us, Monsignor Bruce Kent, one of the best-known person who has dedicated his life for peace in the world. He has held some very high positions in the campaign for nuclear disarmament, and at present he holds the honorary title of Honorary Vice President. Mr. Bruce Kent.
Well, it's an enormous pleasure to come here this evening. I was born at the other end of the Northern Line up in Edgware, so it's a great pleasure to see what Morden looks like and to come all the way down amongst you. A great pleasure, and especially to have the warm welcome which I've had from so many people, and to meet other people of faith who believe our mission under God is to work for world peace. And with that, I am your partner and your friend, and I'm very honoured to be here this evening. When I was a soldier in Northern Ireland nearly 50 years ago, we were sent out on sentry duty, but they never gave us any guns. We just stood in a little hut. And because at that time it looked like a place of peace, so we didn't know anything about the IRA. We were there quite innocent and quite unarmed, because Belfast looked like a peaceful place. I have never forgotten that lesson, because actually Belfast was not a peaceful place. Underneath the surface of that calm, there was a sense of injustice and violence waiting to break out, because justice was not being done. That's always been a lesson to me. You can look at a peaceful community and say how wonderful, but you can wonder what's going on under the surface. We look at British society, more or less, we say a peaceful community. Please, only a couple of weeks ago, we endorsed our belief that peace depends on ultimate violence by voting for another generation of nuclear weapons at a cost that will completely make all our charitable work look ridiculous. Billions and billions of pounds. And we did it, a peaceful community. The one event which was not cancelled in London during the massacres in New York, which started this current campaign that we have, the one thing that was not cancelled was the Expo, the sale of British weapons to other countries. And we are the second biggest seller of weapons to other countries. And amazingly, we are surprised that young boys carry knives on streets when we can tell their adult friends elsewhere, you can buy a tank or a gun or whatever, and it's all good profit. When I was a young Catholic, I was very insular and very self-confident, but I hope my mind has opened a bit. The first Pope, Peter, had to have a hard lesson when he was dealing with the Roman centurion, and suddenly it came into his head. He said, God has no favourites. And God has no favourites. We all have different ways to God, and we have to work together. And I think building peace built on justice is the fundamental work for all those who are working as children of God. I am delighted to be with you this evening. Thank you for the honour of inviting me.
Thank you. Once again, Hazur, we have with us our dear friend and constant supporter, should I say, Lord Avebury. He needs no introduction to the Ahmadis in the UK. Indeed, dare I say, no introduction to the Ahmadis in the world. The real value of Eric lies in his humanity. I don't want to go on introducing too much, and his humane propensities. He is always ready to help anyone who is wronged or needs help. It gives me great pleasure to welcome a sincere and precious friend, Eric Avebury.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you very much, Salim, for your extremely kind words. And also, thank you for the enormous privilege and honour that you've given me in asking me to introduce His Holiness, the Supreme Head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community worldwide and the fifth Khalifa after the promised Messiah and the spiritual leader of a faith which commands the allegiance of tens of millions of people, as you've heard, in 180 different countries. His Holiness eloquently and persistently returns to these themes of peace, tolerance, love and understanding amongst the followers of different faiths, which are the bedrock of his own Islamic faith. And I'm sure you would agree with me that there can be no subject more important for the future of the planet than how we do achieve peace. Peace between states, peace within states, peace between communities inhabiting the same territories. Because without peace and without security, there can be no development, and the attainment of even the basic UN Millennium Development Goals, which have been set as a target for the developing world, will remain a dream in areas that are plagued with conflict. And the world does face, let's acknowledge it, the challenge of violence and hatred everywhere. And you've only got to look around you. You see genocide unfolding in Darfur. You see Somalia racked by clan strife. You see Eritrea and Ethiopia poised to go back to war with each other. In Iraq, dozens of people blown up every single day. In Afghanistan, wrecked by lawlessness and murder and fueled by drug money. In Colombia, 3 million people displaced from their homes, and perhaps even more child soldiers than in any other country. So everywhere you look, these things are happening. And with tomorrow's bicentenary of the abolition of the Atlantic slave trade in mind, we, I think, also should remember this evening the millions and millions of people around the world who are still living in servitude. It's estimated there are 126 million children worldwide in the worst forms of child labour, 1 in 12 of the world's 5 to 17-year-olds, and 74 million of them under 15 in dangerous and hazardous occupations. 300,000 child soldiers engaged in armed conflicts. Millions of people trapped in bonded labour. The growing evil of people trafficking. So in the face of all this persecution, violence and bloodshed, we desperately need the moral leadership and guidance that we can look for to His Holiness to provide. And he gave the community very distinguished service before he came to his present exalted position in education, in agriculture, in West Africa. He returned from there to Pakistan, where he was responsible for the transformation of Rabwa into a green and flourishing city with advanced education, now, alas, being deliberately run down by a jealous and hostile religious extremist community, as the recent inquiry, which was commissioned by the Parliamentary Human Rights Group, has just demonstrated. Huzur was elected Khalifa in April 2003, and I've seen that in many of his sermons he has emphasized what is called the Rahmaniyat of the gracious God. This is the divine quality of kindness, compassion and benevolence spoken of by the Holy Prophet and by his own predecessor, the promised Messiah. And that strikes a particular chord with me as a Buddhist, I must say, because of its similarities to the virtues of loving kindness that we're enjoined to cultivate. His Holiness has spoken about the need for respect between members of the family, and indeed we have to acknowledge that in today's world, the loss of social cohesion begins at home, where all too often children aren't brought up in loving and harmonious family units. In an address to neighbours of the London Mosque, he said last November, quoting an injunction from Allah in the Holy Quran, calling on everybody to show kindness to parents, relatives, orphans, the needy, companions, neighbours and the traveller. I have the fear that without the environment that kind of injunction requests people to listen to, where there's peace, tolerance and forbearance and above all love, it's going to be harder to create a society in which the next generation can bring these characteristics to bear and to enable the conflicts which plague mankind to be solved. But the example of the Ahmadiyya community, which does practice and propagate this Rahmaniyat at all levels, from the family through the local community, all the way up to international relations, that's a wonderful influence. And it's great we have in this splendid mosque, the largest in Europe, a reminder of the values which it represents. In asking His Holiness to address us, we thank the Ahmadiyya Muslim community for their presence here in the UK and throughout the world, and we humbly and respectfully thank Huzur for the example that he provides, not just for his own community, but for the whole of the human race.